You ever notice how sometimes the solutions that actually change your life don't even make sense at first? It feels crazy, almost too simple to be true, but that's exactly why they work. The fastest breakthroughs don't always come from doing more, stressing more, or complicating things. They come from doing something different. Today, I want to show you a shift, something that might sound a little crazy at first, but if you lean into it, you'll see how quickly it works and how powerfully it can transform your life. We spend most of our lives believing that big change requires big moves. We're conditioned to think we need a new job, a new city, a new relationship, or a complete overhaul of our entire lives before things can truly be different. But in reality, most transformations don't begin with something massive. They start with something small, something so simple it almost feels insignificant. Yet that little shift, when repeated consistently, has the power to change everything about the direction of your life. Think about how rivers carve valleys and mountains. It doesn't happen because of one gigantic wave. It happens because of tiny movements of water, repeated day after day, year after year. The water doesn't look like much at first. It just flows the way it always flows. But over time, those small, consistent motions reshape entire landscapes. Your life works the same way. A simple shift, applied over and over, can cut through the hardest places in your life and create a path that never existed before. We often overlook the power of what feels small because we're waiting for something dramatic. We want lightning bolts, overnight miracles, and moments where everything changes instantly. But the truth is, the fastest and most sustainable changes are born in the smallest adjustments. A change in the words you speak to yourself. A change in the way you respond when you're triggered. A change in whether you choose gratitude instead of bitterness, peace instead of conflict, forgiveness instead of revenge. These choices may not look dramatic to anyone else, but they quietly rewire the way your mind and your spirit operate. Here's the thing, people don't fail because they never had the chance to change. Most people fail because they underestimate the power of small beginnings. They look at a simple habit and say, "That's not enough." They dismiss a small improvement because it doesn't feel grand enough. But the difference between staying stuck and moving forward is rarely about having the perfect plan. It's almost always about having the courage to start with what looks small. Take, for example, the power of language. A small shift in how you speak can completely transform the atmosphere around you. Instead of saying, "I can't handle this," say, "I'll figure this out one step at a time." Instead of saying, "This always happens to me," say, "This is my chance to respond differently." That little shift may seem insignificant in the moment, but it changes the way your brain processes stress. It moves you from helplessness to hope, from victimhood to victory. Over time, that simple practice builds a stronger, more resilient version of you. Another area where simple shifts create massive change is in your daily habits. Think about the difference between scrolling on your phone for 20 minutes versus reading something that feeds your mind. One feels like nothing, just a choice in the moment, but over time, that small decision compounds into something bigger. The scroll leaves you empty, the reading leaves you stronger, one drains you, one builds you. Simple shifts like this don't look powerful at first glance, but the compound effect over weeks, months, and years becomes undeniable. And let's be real, it's not the dramatic changes we usually stick with. It's not the 12-hour gym marathons or the sudden crash diets. Those fade out because they're built on shock, not sustainability. The shifts that last are the ones you can actually repeat. Choosing to walk for 10 minutes every day. Choosing water instead of soda. choosing to listen instead of argue, choosing to pause instead of explode. These don't feel heroic in the moment, but if you stay faithful to them, they will change the way you live, love, and lead. A lot of us get trapped because we believe the lie that if we can't do it all at once, it's not worth doing at all. That's where people quit before they even start, but you don't need to move the mountain in one day. You just need to push one stone, one choice today, one shift tomorrow, one decision repeated long enough until suddenly, what once felt impossible becomes your new normal. It's not about perfection, it's about direction. If you shift your direction even 1 degree today, that shift will take you to an entirely different destination over time. Picture a plane flying across the ocean. If the pilot shifts the course by even a single degree, the plane will land hundreds of miles away from the original destination. That's the power of one small shift in your own life. The difference between who you are today and who you could become tomorrow doesn't start with a giant leap. It starts with a subtle turn. You might not see the results instantly. That's why people give up too soon. They do something small, they look around, and nothing looks different. So they think it didn't work. But transformation isn't always visible in the moment. Think of planting a seed. You water it, you nurture it, and for a while, nothing happens. But underground, something is happening. Roots are forming, strength is building, the growth is hidden until one day it suddenly breaks through the surface. That's what small shifts do for you. The work is invisible at first, but eventually, the results can't be ignored. Sometimes the hardest part is believing that what feels so small could actually matter. But the truth is, the small things are the big things in disguise. They're the foundation, they're the starting line, they're the momentum you need to carry you into the larger breakthroughs you've been waiting for. If you can honor the little changes, you'll unlock the bigger changes you've been praying for. And here's what's amazing. Once you start with one simple shift, it doesn't stay small. It creates a ripple effect. One better decision leads to another. One healthier choice inspires more. One act of self-control builds into discipline. That small shift becomes the spark that ignites a fire in your life. What felt small at the beginning becomes massive as it spreads into every area of who you are. What feels strange at first often brings the biggest results. Most people hesitate when something feels unusual, uncomfortable, or outside of their normal way of doing things. We're wired to trust what feels safe and familiar, even if that familiar pattern isn't giving us the life we want. The truth is, the biggest breakthroughs often live right on the other side of discomfort. When you step into a method or mindset that feels awkward in the beginning, it usually means you're breaking free from old habits. Think about it. If what you've always done hasn't been working, then doing something that feels strange is actually proof that you're finally stepping into something new. It's not about how normal it feels in the moment. It's about how powerful the results become once you trust the process. The strange, the uncomfortable, the unusual, those are often the doors that open fastest to real transformation. You can look at any area of life and see this pattern play out. In relationships, it might feel strange to listen instead of defend, or to stay calm instead of reacting with anger. At work, it might feel unusual to slow down and focus deeply instead of rushing through tasks. Spiritually, it might feel odd to pause, pray, or be still when your instinct is to panic and control. Each of those shifts feels unnatural in the beginning, but the change they produce is undeniable. It's the kind of change that accelerates growth because it forces your mind and body to break out of autopilot. And when you get out of autopilot, that's when you start moving forward faster than you ever thought possible. Fast breakthroughs come from trying the unexpected. We are taught to believe that progress is always slow, heavy, and requires years of grinding. But that's not always the case. Some of the fastest shifts happen when you try the opposite of what you've always done. If you're used to fighting every battle, sometimes walking away gives you peace instantly. If you're used to overthinking every decision, sometimes taking quick action sets you free immediately. If you're used to running from pain, sometimes facing it head on brings healing faster than years of avoidance. The unexpected path feels risky because it challenges your patterns, but it's often the very thing that releases you into a new season with speed. Life has a way of surprising you when you let go of your default reactions. The unexpected can look like silence when someone expects an argument. It can look like kindness in the face of bitterness. It can look like faith when logic tells you to fear. These responses don't follow the normal script, and that's why they produce results that feel almost supernatural in their speed. It's crazy because it breaks the rules of how most people live, but it works because truth always carries power. The fastest changes aren't always about time. They're about alignment, stepping into choices that connect you with wisdom, peace, and strength beyond your own. When you embrace what feels strange and lean into the unexpected, you position yourself for results that don't just come slowly over years. They show up quickly and powerfully. It's not magic. It's the fruit of doing what most people are too afraid to do, stepping outside the comfort of what feels normal and into the possibility of what feels new. That's why what seems crazy at first so often becomes the breakthrough that works the fastest. What feels strange at first often brings the biggest results. Think about it. Our minds are wired for comfort, for repetition, for patterns that make us feel safe. We like what's familiar because it doesn't stretch us, it doesn't make us question ourselves, and it doesn't demand too much risk. But the truth is, the very things that feel uncomfortable or even crazy in the beginning are often the exact steps that lead to transformation. If you trace back your own growth, you'll realize it never came from staying in the same spot. It came when you did something that felt uncertain, something that went against your old habits. That's why fast breakthroughs usually show up when we're willing to try what doesn't seem normal. Imagine trying to solve a problem you've had for years by using the same approach over and over. You keep repeating it, but nothing changes. That's because change doesn't come from repetition of the old. It comes from introducing something new, something that looks unusual compared to what you've always done. It might seem silly, it might even look foolish to other people, but that's often where the door opens. People who experience quick progress in their lives usually aren't the ones who played it safe. They're the ones who dared to try what felt strange. The reason it works so quickly is because the mind and body get shaken out of autopilot. Think about how easy it is to go through your day doing things without thinking. You react the same way to stress. You use the same excuses. You tell yourself the same story. That's autopilot. But when you suddenly decide to respond differently, it interrupts the cycle. That interruption feels awkward. It feels unnatural. But in that disruption, the brain starts creating new pathways, and the results begin to appear faster than you expect. For example, if you're used to meeting anger with anger, then the day you choose to respond with calm silence, it feels wrong at first. It feels weak, but then you notice the argument doesn't escalate. The tension fades quicker. Suddenly, what felt like a strange move shows its power. Or think about waking up 1 hour earlier than usual. The first few days feel terrible. You question yourself, wondering why you're doing it. But soon you realize you've created extra time for yourself, and your productivity starts climbing. That simple, crazy change shifts your entire rhythm. This is the reason so many people miss out on breakthroughs. They quit too soon because it feels uncomfortable in the beginning. They judge the process by the feeling instead of the result. But if you push through that discomfort, you start to see how quickly the shift works, and that speed surprises you because it's not about time, it's about alignment. When you align yourself with a new way of thinking and acting, momentum picks up almost immediately. Sometimes the craziest thing you can do is the one thing you've been avoiding because it didn't make sense. But the moment you try it, you realize it makes more sense than anything else you've done before. It works faster because it breaks the old cycle instantly instead of letting you run in circles for months or years. That's the beauty of trying what feels strange. It doesn't just change your path slowly, it jolts you into a new one. It's not about doing more, it's about doing different. Most people spend their lives believing that progress is about adding more, piling on more responsibilities, stacking more habits, chasing more strategies. They think that the harder they grind, the faster they'll grow. But the truth is, more is not always the answer. Sometimes it's subtraction. Sometimes it's changing one simple approach that flips the whole outcome. Think about it. You can push against a locked door for hours, sweating and exhausting yourself, or you can step back, try the handle, and realize it pulls open. That one shift, choosing different over more, saves you time, energy, and frustration. It feels almost too easy, almost crazy, but it works fast. When you try to do more, you end up exhausted, overwhelmed, and stuck in the same cycle. You chase after more work, more hours, more strategies, but the return is rarely equal to the effort. That's because repetition without change doesn't lead to transformation. It just reinforces the same results. Doing different, though, interrupts the cycle. It creates space for clarity, for new possibilities, for faster results. Different doesn't always mean harder. Different means smarter. Different means stepping outside the same routine and being willing to try the thing that feels unusual, unconventional, or even uncomfortable at first. The people who see breakthroughs are not always the ones who put in the most hours, but the ones who dared to pivot. They dared to speak when silence was expected. They dared to rest when everyone else was burning out. They dared to take a small, unusual step that felt insignificant in the moment, but multiplied into massive results over time. And that's the power of different. It's not about how much more you can pour out of yourself. It's about whether you're willing to change the flow altogether. Doing different requires courage. It's not natural for most people to break out of the familiar path, even when that path is clearly not working. We cling to what we know because it feels safe, even if it's keeping us stuck. That's why so many never experience the fast shift, the crazy but effective breakthrough. They stay in the pattern of more effort, more noise, more struggle, never realizing that different was always the key. The moment you try something new, the moment you break the pattern, you open the door for results that happen quicker than you thought possible. Different also teaches you about perspective. It opens your eyes to see that the problem wasn't as big as it looked. It was just approached the wrong way. What once felt like a wall becomes a doorway. What once felt like a burden becomes a lesson. And that lesson often arrives faster than you expected. It doesn't take years to change direction. Sometimes it only takes a moment of boldness, one crazy step of doing different, to see progress appear right before your eyes. Sometimes in life, the most powerful changes don't come from adding more effort or piling on more responsibilities. They come from small, simple shifts that almost feel too easy to matter, but those shifts, when practiced consistently, can move mountains.